So I was able to go with them, and I think it was okay with them, I hope.
Yeah, Allie's an adopted daughter in our family, so we can't get rid of her. She can't get rid of us, no matter what happens.
Yeah, they're kind of stuck with me.
I thought you were going to say, like, your parents, like, still mention it today, like, oh, she came on the bloody trip. Like, oh, she ruined the trip.
Well, I hate to break it to you, Allie.
They might, you never know.
Welcome to the Winging It Travel Podcast with me, James Hammond. Every Monday, I'll be joined by guests to talk about their travel stories, travel tips, backpacking advice, and so much more. Right now, I'm taking the podcast on the road travelling with me. So tune in every week for short-form episodes detailing all my travels alongside my Monday guest episode. Are you a backpacker, gap year student, or simply someone who loves to travel? Then this is the podcast for you, designed to inspire you to travel. There'll be stories to tell, tips to share, and experiences to inspire. Welcome to the show.
Yeah. Okay. Righty-ho. Yeah, let's go. Okay. Hello and welcome to this week's episode where I'm joined by Regan and Allie from the Wanderlusting Wives Podcast. Today we're going to talk about some travel favourites from them both, including Denmark, Sweden, the USA road tripping, Iceland and Ireland. And I want to know why they started their travel podcast, what's in store for them in 2024 with the podcast and travel. And I imagine there'll be some fun stories in there too. So guys, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thanks so much for having us. We're doing great. We're really excited to be here.
Yeah, doing well.
That's great. So where are you both based right now? Can you tell the listeners?
I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
And I'm in Tampa, Florida. Very different from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. But
I was then going to say very different places. Can you tell maybe my European listeners, each of you, what your area is like in terms of, like, I don't know, the weather, the topography, the people, like, give us a sense of an idea of what it's like.
Yeah, drastically different from each other. So Pittsburgh, they always say like Seattle is really rainy. Well, Pittsburgh is really rainy and very gloomy, lots of cloudy days. The winter isn't too bad, maybe a little bit of snow in January and February, but usually not much after February. The people are super nice here. There's like a whole nother dialect, like yins means y'all and sweeper means vacuum. So it's like speaking a whole nother language, even though English is my first language. I don't know what they're talking about half the time. They love to eat pierogies, so if you like a noodle with like a mashed potato inside, you've come to the right place. Yeah, it's a really great city. It's not like as big as, say, New York City, but it's a decent sized city, industrial in its beginnings with coal industry. So it's on its way up, and it's improving. It's pretty reasonable as far as the cost of living. So a lot of people are moving here, especially in the medical and technology fields, because we have some Microsoft headquarters and Pitt University, which is really big with medicine. So good place to be if you're in the technology or medicine.
Wow, interesting. And Florida, completely different, I'd imagine.
In terms of climate, absolutely. The one thing that I am noticing a trend in is that kind of like a lot of the jobs are in technology and in coding and things like that. So we're a big tech city also. I feel like every place is kind of becoming a tech city, you know, with how everything is going these days. But yeah, Florida is very different. We have almost no like cloudy days, which is really excellent. I actually just moved to Tampa from New York, Rochester, New York, about 6 months ago. So it's been about 6 months. So I'm still kind of learning exactly what the kind of like cultural temperature of the city is, but so far, it just feels it's such a vibrant city, and that like the weather obviously helps where it's like year round. We kind of get to always be outside. Everybody just seems to be kind of more laid back and just relaxed. Like the quality of living, I've only been here 6 months, but I can totally tell the difference, quite honestly, going from a gloomier place to down here, which is the biggest reason why my husband and I moved in the first place. But the people are really kind of warm. There are a lot of rich people in Tampa, so it's like you kind of run the gamut when it comes to like how you're spending your money, what the cost of living is. It's a little all over the place. But yeah, beach days are plenty and it's just fun to be in the sun and warm. I'm a warm kind of gal, so yeah.
I do wonder if that's underrated, the lifestyle in terms of sun, because I always hark back to living in Australia because it's always sunny. And I wonder, like, is that where I'm supposed to be in terms of the lifestyle and weather, which is a bit like Florida by the sounds of it. So I'm like, because when it's gloomy, it can get a bit down in the dumps sometimes. I don't mind, like, so Calgary to the right of us, right, is the sunniest place in Canada, but it does get cold, right? It gets like -30, which it was like 3 weeks ago. But it is sunny, so it's like cold, but the blue sky is there. But in Vancouver, it's just grey.
Yeah.
Relatable. I feel that.
I'll try to push some sunshine and warmth and like good Cuban food your way.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. I've only been to Florida once, and that was when I was going to Brazil from Hawaii. Had a stopover in Miami, and I tried to order a cup of tea at the airport, and they didn't understand me. So then I realized, I need to speak some Spanish. So had to get my Google thing out and try it out. But that was quite an interesting scenario. There wasn't many words. It's like, can I have a cup of tea, please? Didn't really understand. So that was interesting.
That is interesting. I've never heard that before. Yeah. Wow.
Maybe tea doesn't exist, does it? I don't know.
I mean, I still drink it, but I brought it from New York, so who knows?
You're running out then, aren't you? Yeah. Okay. I like to delve back into my guests' histories in terms of travel and see where the interest is. So first question is, where did you both grow up? And was there any travel in your early years that maybe sort of ignited the wanderlust or the travel bug or the interest in travel at least?
Yeah, we actually, our kind of origin, where did we grow up story is the same in a way. Mm-hmm. We both grew up in the same small town in Western New York. We lived one street away. We both had the same house number. We had the same house color. So right from the start, it was kind of meant to be, I guess, that we were destined to be friends. So yeah, we grew up in the same neighborhood, and honestly, travel started from a very young age for me, and it was Disney World for a while, honestly. It still kind of is as my family has grown and tons of nieces and nephews, and that's just like a great place where we always made family memories. And because that was like the place to go, and because Disney itself was all about making family memories, and then my family was really passionate about making travel memories, travel just became synonymous with bonding with your family for me. And so that just kind of translated into any other trips that we would take. I had two parents as I had two teachers for parents. So we had all the same school breaks, which was a huge, like, I'm so grateful for that growing up. Not everybody has that. It was really cool. But that meant that all school breaks, we were pretty much traveling wherever it was. My mom was always really good about making each vacation really balanced when it came to there's an educational aspect, there's an adventurous aspect, there's a historical aspect, all of these different kinds of things. She was always keeping those things in mind, and it just became a way to make family memories and a way to educate myself about the world from a really young age. So that's kind of my background in terms of what travel looked like growing up and how it became really important to me from a really young age.
Interesting.
Yeah, for me, my first memory that I have of traveling is I was in 3rd grade and my family went to London, Dublin, and Paris. So my dad is a high school history teacher, and we took students there through EF tours. So we were able to go along with my dad, my brother, and my mom, and my dad and I all went over there. And it was only for like a week, I believe, in February. And that was my first international experience. And it just left me in awe. And the thing that I will always remember is seeing the Colosseum in my textbooks for the first time. And not on that trip, but a different trip, we went to Rome, and just seeing like, oh my gosh, like I was actually standing there before. and I was able to make that connection and share some of my stories with my classmates. And that's where my like desire for wanderlust just kept growing. I got to make these connections in my classes and got to share these experiences with friends and other family who hadn't gone there. And just like Regan said, like traveling is a way for our family to spend time together. So each summer, my dad's a teacher, but not my mom. So she had to take time off, but we would always go on some kind of family trip, whether that be in the US or outside of the US. It was a great way for us to connect, and my dad being a history teacher, also learn a lot about different history and cultures and languages as well, and kind of led me down this path of wanderlust and forever chasing the next adventure.
It's very interesting because in Europe, we grow up not really, I think this is my opinion, appreciating next door, which is France or Germany, even though we went on those trips in school because they're like just over the water there. But I think what we see as glamorized or as a place to get to is America. So a lot of people go to Florida as one because it's sunny and it's kind of quite nice to go for families. I think it's a pretty family friendly destination. But New York is like, oh wow, that is like that's where you got to go. And I think it's out of reach for a few people. Well, it was when I was younger. Maybe it's okay now because flights are a little bit cheaper than they were. But for me, it was like watching some Friends, the TV show. So I think my generation probably saw that and was like, oh, I wonder what New York's like then. So I think that probably gets a lot of people's attention. And of course, Hollywood is LA, like the other side. So I think from my perspective, didn't really care for, this sounds awful, didn't really care for like Colosseum or the Eiffel Tower because it's just there and it's normal and it's same as probably going to London. But for some reason, going to USA, wow, that's got to be done. So it's interesting how people in a different side of the pond kind of see where to go and what they think is, oh, wow, that's where I want to go next. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, I think I've actually had a similar experience with that. We went to Europe so often or on a cruise so much. And Niagara Falls was like 45 minutes to an hour from our house. And it took me until I was a teenager to go there. It was just not on the top of our list of things to do. So it's just that same kind of mindset. And like, as an American, I'm like, I wish I lived in Europe. It's like hopping states to go to all these different countries. And I wish I could do that. But then I also have to realize like how lucky we are that we do have all these states that so many other people are trying to get to visit. And that's right here in my own country. So I think it's just all about perspective, and, you kind of take for granted what you have right here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think
that I had the same exact thought, Elliot. We were on the same wavelength. Yeah. It's so silly. Yeah.
It's silly. And also, I think there's a point to be made where Niagara Falls is a great example. There isn't really anything like that I can think of that's close to UK off the top of my head. Like waterfalls that grand, like that amazing. It is just something I can't really imagine is close. So I think that probably draws people in a little bit. Another weird thing might be like skyscrapers. I mean, we have a few in London, maybe, and maybe some other cities in Europe, but not on the level of USA. And when you see like New York skyscrapers or even LA or whatever, you think, oh wow, like what is that even like to look at? So yeah, I think there's something to be said that something seen different is quite powerful in a sense that then you don't appreciate on your doorstep there's Eiffel Tower down the road. So yeah, I've still not been to Amsterdam. I've still not been to like Norway or Sweden. So I'm now looking back going, oh, I should have gone more. Yeah. Damn.
There will always be that kind of like damn moment, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think what gets to me is as travel podcasters, if you need your like content for, I don't know, maybe talking about a trip you've been on, like being based in London or Paris, how many places can you go to every year that's completely different country and language? Like the content is unbelievable in terms of that sense, as well as seeing the place, of course. But when I'm here in Canada, I'm like, oh, it's expensive to get out of Vancouver. The Rockies are great, done it but 4 or 5 times, but same country, and down to USA is same. So yeah, maybe there's always that because you live there, but there you go. It's interesting.
Yeah. That whole idea of like traveling beyond your backyard is so like I think you said the word like glamorized or glamorous. How that just feels, if it's farther away, it feels like a bigger escape. And a lot of times that's what people are looking for with their vacation. And I think that travel itself has a lot of different like purposes, I guess, where sometimes it's vacation. So it's that trip that a family has been saving for all year, and it's their summer trip that they're going to go on all together. That's the one trip they'll go a year. And the purpose is to relax and to connect as a family. Then there are other trips where it's like, we really want to see all of these different things, and we know we're not going to sleep. We know this isn't going to be relaxing. It's going to be traveling. Like I think there's like that distinction too between travel and like vacations. So if you're looking for that big vacation, which I feel like a lot of people tend to be doing, the farther you go, it's almost as if the miles add up, and you think that'll just end up making it so much better than
great
if
point.
you went somewhere nearby. Exactly what we're all saying. It's like it's interesting how the psychology kind of plays into it. It's really quite interesting.
Yeah, the psychology is interesting because if you're just a normal working family, say normal in brackets, you're only going to get a certain amount of vacation time a year. So you're going to really have to strategize about how to use that properly, because I guess you will need a break as well. So you kind of need 2 trips at least, right? And I know in UK you get 4 to 5 weeks holiday vacation a year, but I know in North America it's not the same. So I do wonder how much that plays into it. Teaching is different. I think that's a caveat because it's so unique. Like lecturing or teaching, you get those summer holidays off and stuff like that. But for the most people who just have the 2 or 3 weeks off a year, yeah, you got to strategize how to split it up into a break, but also into travel. It's quite difficult.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. Yeah.
I'm a teacher, so I can't really give much input on that one.
That was my next question, actually. I was just going to ask right now, what are you guys doing for work, and how often can you get away 4 trips per year?
Yeah, so I teach 2nd grade. So for those of you who aren't from the United States, that's 7 and 8-year-olds. And they are just a bundle of joy because they still love learning at this point, and they're usually excited to be there. Usually, not always, but usually. And I do get the summers off. I do have 8 days off to use throughout the school year, like personal days. So that is really nice. Now, my husband's not a teacher. He's an investment and data analyst. So his time off is limited. He has, I think, 3 weeks, which is a decent amount for his field of work. But it's also hard because we're only limited to those days that he's available. I'm not quite brave enough to go and solo travel. I would love to be brave enough to do that, but that kind of just squeezes down the amount of days we can use for travel based on his schedule. Like we went to Europe over like Christmas, in between Christmas and New Year's, and it was like 6 days because that's all he had time off for. And I had 2 weeks, but he only had 6 days. So have to cram things in when we can, which kind of stinks because then you're not getting the full experience, but at least you get to go and have those experiences.
Yeah, I don't think anybody is as passionate about their career as Allie is. She is so passionate about teaching and about her kiddos and making sure that they are just so well cared for. Yeah, so I am a communications manager. So I work in communications, social media, all of that different stuff for the Quad Preparatory School, which is a school for neurodiverse students that's actually based in New York City. So I work full-time remote. My husband also, he was in theater, so our schedules were completely opposite for several years, about 4 years. And then last year he made the transition out of theater and now works for the same school as I do. So we are on the same schedule finally, which is amazing. And we get about 4 weeks vacation a year, and we do travel quite a bit, not just because of the days we have off, but then also working remotely, you can do that from wherever. So we've made trips up to the Outer Banks in North Carolina to visit family in New York, gone out to Colorado. We've just kind of made our flexible schedule work really well when it comes to traveling because we have that flexibility and we want to take advantage of it. So yeah, we travel pretty, I would say maybe 4 weeks out of the year in total. Yeah. It's a pretty decent amount.
Yeah, it's decent. Yeah, and yeah, two very different scenarios with teaching and just another job basically, which is quite hard to marry up, especially if you're a couple and you are not both teachers, right? That's quite difficult
Yes.
because then
It is.
you're probably asking the question, "Oh, I got 2 extra weeks off." I don't know why there's balloons in my picture there. Um, yeah, don't know what happened there. Yeah, you got 2 weeks off, like 2 weeks extra off. Like, oh, do I just stay or do I go? It's a difficult one, and I wonder if like a lot of people are thinking they're in the same position and they can't quite make the leap to go solo travel. But it means you can go local travel, right, or to another state. That's okay, but doesn't always have to be international. But
You
yeah,
Yeah,
can fly to
very
definitely.
Tampa.
I know I need to make a trip down to Regan. I do in the summer. I will make a trip up to see my family in New York as well. But I just haven't quite taken a leap further than New York, which is like 4 hours from Pittsburgh. So
yeah.
just getting
Still,
my feet
yeah.
wet a little bit. Yeah, start small, then we'll make our way up.
Yeah, it's absolutely key. And we're going to delve into some of your trips. You've both given me a list of individual trips from yourselves and also a combined one, which is very interesting. So we're going to start with Regan, who went to Ireland. And unbelievably, here we go. This kind of proves my point earlier. I've only been to Dublin and I'm annoyed at it because I think Ireland is a great place to go and travel. So tell us, where did you go in Ireland? And was it like a bit of a road trip or how did you get around? And what were some of the sites that you were hoping to see?
Yeah, Ireland was amazing. When they talk about it being just covered in green, like
Mm.
it is. It 100% is. There was green everywhere and I loved it. We did go kind of all around the country. We did a full road trip. We got our own car and everything. We went from Airbnb to Airbnb all around the country to a lot of different little towns, cities, national parks. A few of the highlights ended up being Belfast, actually in Northern
Oh, Northern
Ireland,
Ireland.
which
Yeah.
yeah, so we made it up there too. I know there's like some historical tension and things like that between like Ireland and Northern Ireland and whatever's going on there, but I absolutely loved Northern Ireland. The Giant's Causeway up at the very north was
Mm.
one of my favorite parts of the entire trip. It was absolutely incredible. We went at sunset, and for those of you who don't know, and I'm not going to get the science of this correct, but it's essentially like right on the water, like there's no land that you can see as you look out onto the water, and there are all of these pillars of stone kind of created, I would assume, by the water over time. And they make kind of like this beehive shape, but they're really tall. So you're kind of climbing on them, and it makes this amazing, gorgeous picture as you're looking out and the sun is setting. Absolutely incredible. That was, I would say, my favorite part of the entire trip. And then in Belfast, the Titanic Museum, of course,
Oh,
that
yeah.
was incredible. I had no idea that Ireland had such a kind of significant history with the Titanic. The Titanic was built in
Belfast.
Belfast,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is really great.
Mm.
I didn't know that. And that was so cool to see like, oh, there's the shipping yard and like it has the whole ship drawn out with like how big it was and everything. It
Yeah,
was just
yeah.
so cool. And then in Cove, which is in, I want to say, southwestern Ireland, that is the last stop that the Titanic made on land before heading across the ocean. And of course, then we all know the fate of the Titanic, but it was so cool to be able to see this heralded piece of history and kind of see a little more tangible because we in the United States, of course, we learned about the Titanic and there's musicals and movies and everything, but like to see the actual history was really cool. That was Northern Ireland. I loved Northern Ireland. Some of the other highlights were there were a couple of really amazing national parks, of course, with castles, some without castles.
Hmm.
All of them had waterfalls and greenery. And you really can't go wrong with either of those,
What more
right?
do you want?
Exactly. Right. And yes, 100%. So Killarney National Park is in aptly named Killarney, which I believe is also in southwestern Ireland. And it has these amazing trails that go through what looks like a fairy's home. which was really incredible. Just green and mossy and waterfalls, but like the sunlight coming through in that amazing way that it does, where you can like see the rays of sunlight. It was just magical. And that was really what so much of Ireland was these moments of what felt like magic. Like I expected a leprechaun or a troll or something to pop out at any minute. It was absolutely incredible, and I loved the people. I loved the food. The food doesn't have a lot of variation, but I loved it. I like you give me the sausage and the potatoes, the
Oh,
bangers
tell me
and
about it.
mash.
I'm the same.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
so good, right?
Yeah, up
Uh,
there.
yeah. So and the people, there's such a kind of there's a weighty past there in Ireland, and the people feel that. Like I could feel it talking to some people, of like they're sharing their own stories and their perspectives on life over the course of, maybe it's stories passed down through generations in their family, maybe it's something they endured on their own, but there's so much darkness in Ireland's history. I mean, there's a lot of darkness everywhere. Everywhere has their own history,
Mm.
but you just get these people who are grounded and who are realistic and who are warm and welcoming despite everything that has happened. And I just had the most amazing time talking to people about their own histories, getting pub recommendations, of course. And yeah, just had a really, really great time.
I think when we talk about road trips, right? Because we did road trip Canada and USA last summer, and I was saying the other night, oh, what's like if tomorrow camper van road trip? Where are you thinking? Ireland is definitely in top 3, 100%,
Mm,
because it is so green, it's safe, the roads are great, there's nice little towns, and the nature is incredible. It just seems like the perfect place to road trip, especially if you're a bit nervous. I think it's a good place to try out first. And yeah, the
mhm.
history is obviously interesting. Being English, it's not great. I think we've had a bit of a tough time in terms of relations, and probably English's fault to a degree. But let's not go there. But I think the newer generation are kind of bringing it forward as a country much better than the past, and I think it's going in the right direction now, which is great. I'd still be
Mm.
interested, if I went to a random pub in a village in Ireland and they hear my accent, is there going to be like a little bit of a joke or whatever? I'm not sure. And that kind of does play my mind a little bit, but I'm sure it'll be fine because they are some of the nicest people you're going to meet. So yeah, Ireland is and looks incredible. Only been to Dublin. It's a bit of a cliche, but there you go.
Mm. It's an amazing city.
Oh yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, I've been to USA. Where you been? New York. Okay, yeah, cool. That's great. One of the best cities,
Right,
but there's loads more to see, isn't there?
right.
Yeah. Okay, Ali, we're gonna touch on Bolivia. I've done quite a lot of Bolivia on my podcast because I've been there, and a few guests have been there as well. Amazing place, unique, completely different to what I've experienced before. So tell me your experience of arriving there. What was your first impression?
Yeah, so my first impression was of La Paz in the airport. So arriving at what, 11,000 feet, so
Yeah.
roughly whatever that might be, 3,000 something meters. I was like, oh, I'm totally fine. Everyone's like, gosh, it's so hard to breathe. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's totally fine. And then all of a sudden it just hits me and I
Mm.
start puking and I'm
Oh,
like, what is going on? It just like hit me out of nowhere. And we were stuck in the airport for 6 hours. We had a 6-hour layover. So I'm like, of all places to be. And they were trying to like give me cocoa leaf tea to like help with the altitude sickness, and that was disgusting. That made me puke even more. So my first impression was not so great, but then we got to Cochabamba, which is where we were staying, and then things turned around. That was only like, I think 8,000 feet in elevation, so still very high, but much easier to handle, and no puking once I got there. So things turned around. I absolutely loved it when I got there. I went with my university, so it wasn't just like me on my own or with my family. But there was a small group of us. There was only 10 of us there. And we stayed with the host family. So we were immersed in the culture and the language. And I know very basic Spanish, and my host family knows very basic English. So that was quite the back and forth of trying to figure out what each other were saying, and just really pushing myself. I am very reserved, and for me to put myself out there, especially in a new language that I barely know, I know like high school level Spanish, was really tricky, but also an incredible experience. We also got the chance to attend a church service with our host family, which I had never done in another country before. So that was really cool. And it was all in Spanish. So that really tested my Spanish knowledge. We did not learn about church in school, so I did not really know a lot of the words there, but you get the general idea of it was a Catholic service. So, stand up, sit down, it's the same kind of structure there. And we were doing some service projects while we were there. So I helped build a school, which I was super passionate about as a teacher. I was excited to bring, more accessibility to education there. And I'm currently working on a certification to be able to teach ESL. So English is a second language. Anyone who comes to the US who doesn't speak English, same kind of thing as like TEFL. That's the other keyword there. And that kind of was inspired by my trip to Bolivia, getting to have my own struggles with speaking another language and realizing, so many students come to the United States that don't speak English at all, not even hello or my name is. So just being vulnerable and having that experience really ignited my passion for wanting to eventually teach ESL. So I loved being uncomfortable, and I like to follow the motto, like life begins outside of your comfort zone. And I think that's another moment that really inspired my wanderlust of, yes, I am reserved in my day-to-day life, but when I'm traveling, this could be a once in a lifetime experience. And I want to make sure I'm putting myself out there and trying new things and getting uncomfortable so much that I tried cow tongue. Like if you were to hear that without really knowing me, you'd be like, okay. But then even knowing more so that I grew up just eating like chicken nuggets because I was so picky. And then here I am like cow tongue. Yes, I'll try that. But it was in the shape of a tongue too. So there was no hiding the fact that it was cow tongue. Yeah. That makes it even more disgusting, but it was not as bad as you think. It just kind of tasted like beef. So Cochabamba was amazing. Once we got past La Paz, it was great from there. And it was really amazing just to experience a new culture. I hadn't been to South America before. So that was just really cool to see how the family unit comes together and how that's such the center of their culture. The host family, their grandfather was sick and he was staying with them. And every day there'd be aunts, uncles, cousins. The family was just coming in waves to help take care of the grandpa. He wasn't dying at that point, but he was, getting to be at that point probably in the coming months. So it was just incredible to see how they all come together and set aside their own obligations to be surrounded by the family. And then the other thing that was like nothing I've ever experienced before was protests in Bolivia.
Oh yeah, I experienced the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you've
sitting in the road.
if you've ever watched The Walking Dead, that's kind of what it felt like. The streets were blocked off with like these old rundown looking cars. People were just like walking around. They weren't gunshots, but they were like these popping noises that sounded like gunshots. So like as an American, it's like, oh, guns everywhere. So initial thought was, oh gosh, we're going to be shot. But then our host family was like, don't worry, like this is totally safe. And we got to walk around the streets and see like how the country was coming together to protest the government, whatever was happening at that particular time. So it was an inspiring and eye-opening experience. And my visa is good for 10 years. So I still have, 4 more years on it. So I'm hoping I get to go back, and I have this dream of teaching at the school I helped to build. We'll see. It's still not finished yet. It's almost there, but that is my dream, to be able to go back and give back even more than I already have.
Would you go and see some other sites there as well, like the salt flats to the west?
Yes.
Maybe the Amazon jungle, which is underrated because it's arguably the best place to see it from. And there's loads more, but like, have you thought about that?
Yeah, we were going to go to the salt flats, but then the protests happened, so the roads were blocked and we didn't get to go. So that was quite a bummer. But yeah, I would love to go back and see the salt flats. They just they don't even seem real. They're so incredible, like in pictures, and like I have to go there and see them for myself. So I'm really, really hoping I can get back there the next 4 years.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I think the tip I got from a journalist came onto my podcast to Bolivia for altitude sickness is to come from the east. So if you land somewhere in the east, it's lower level, and you can work your way up towards La Paz and kind of go up to those higher elevations. Potosi is incredibly high. I went there. I don't know how I survived there, but I just about got away with it. But that is as high as you can go in terms of a town. But yeah, if you start east, work your way west, you kind of ease into it, and then you go and see the salt flats to the west, you go back down. It should be all good. But yeah, flying straight into La Paz is going to be a struggle.
Yeah, flying from Miami to La Paz was...
Oh, yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, quite the killer, but live to tell the story.
Yeah. I think I got a bus in northern Argentina to northern Chile, and the altitude was going up. I just about was not sick on the bus, but I was close. I was almost there. I think we just arrived in time. So as soon as I got out, I was like, head in hands and just trying to chill out. But God,
yeah,
stressful.
Being stuck in the airport for 6 hours was the worst thing that could have happened.
If it's Singapore airport, yeah, quite nice. But if it's maybe
right.
La Paz, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And we're going to go back to Regan for road tripping because we've done that in the summer and we absolutely loved it. We kind of harked back all the time to the summer last year, driving across Canada and then back across through the US. What was your route that you want to talk about on your road trip? And tell us some of the national parks that you visited.
Yeah, so I've done cross-country trips 3 times now, I believe, doing a different route each time. So the first route, we went out through like the northern part of the United States. So through Wisconsin, Minnesota, then back down through like Wyoming, and then kind of circle back.
Yeah.
Another trip, we kind of went through the central part of the country and like Kansas, Oklahoma, all of those quote unquote boring states, which that was proven wrong.
Not true. Yeah.
Right. And yes. And then the third one, we went kind of a southern route. So through Arkansas, and we did like Memphis, Texas, up through Colorado, or I don't remember if Colorado was on that trip, but New Mexico, Arizona at least, and then kind of circle back.
Oh.
So we've covered a lot of the country, but some of the highlights for national parks, to be honest, when I heard we were going to Arkansas, I was like, are you kidding me? What is in Arkansas? But actually, one of my favorite national parks was in Arkansas. Hot Springs National Park was awesome. It's like, because there's such a bed for hot springs, which is just like that kind of natural warm water. Like, I don't know all of the science, but it's more of a scientific national park than a historical park or something like that. Just very like natural. But it's for years, for decades, it was used as these kind of natural baths. So they built bathhouses along this road in Arkansas, in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and they were used for natural treatments, whether it was like you're just kind of steaming your body in this thing that looked like a torture device where it like it closed and there was only a hole for your head, and that was a little freaky, and I'm glad they do not practice that anymore. But it was just really cool to learn the history of how, even when technology was not where it is today, they were using what was naturally available to them in their environment for healthy purposes. And I'm all for that, the healthy practices. So that was really, really cool to learn about that. And then to get to go to a spa also and soak for the day. That was really nice. A couple of other ones, and of course there's the big ones. There's Yellowstone, there's the Tetons, there's Rocky Mountain, which is my favorite national park. I love Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado. But a couple of the other kind of small ones that people may not always know about, we went to the Manhattan Project National Historic Park.
Oh, wow.
Which was so eerie.
Is that in New Mexico?
It's in New Mexico, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Which New Mexico is an amazing state. It's beautiful.
Only because I watched Oppenheimer the other day. That's how I know.
Oh shoot, I haven't watched it yet. Don't
Oh,
say
right. No,
anything.
no more than
I know what happens because history, but like
history. Yeah.
oh gosh, yes, I need to watch it. I decided to see Barbie instead of Oppenheimer, and now
Fair enough.
I need to make it happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, that entire story with the atomic bombs and then the repercussions that came from that and the political aspects, the kind of turn your head aspects of like what is happening here, just the drama, I guess, of all of it too, and the humanitarian component of it. It was so eerie to be there. So I was really glad to have that experience, especially learning about that. But then it's like, Allie, what you were saying of standing at the Coliseum. It's standing at that site where they were testing this bomb that changed history, like for the world, which, I mean, we can talk all day about how we feel about that. It happened, it changed our world. And then you're standing at the place where all of this happened. It was next level. It was crazy.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because they built the camp in New Mexico to work on it, right? The church was there, the bar was there, the research center was there. Like they were just building this town, being based there, and obviously doing the testing there, right? Not to say anymore because that's what Oppenheimer kind of talks about, but yeah, incredible. Now you said it, I'm like, yeah, I gotta go and check it out. And also because I've been to Japan and obviously seen both spots where they both dropped. I think it's a good circle to do just to understand, what you saw, like the history of it, the use of it, and what it caused there, and come back around and kind of get a nice perspective of both sides. 'Cause it's horrendous when you think about it. So, yeah, interesting. You should go to Japan and then do the full circle.
Yeah, we'll switch. We'll switch and compare notes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we went to a ton more national parks, not to go into all of them, but I guess my last plug for one that's kind of, I would say, underrated is the Black Canyon of the Gunnison. And that's out in Utah, Colorado. Oh goodness. I'm gonna get all of my states mixed up. It's in one of those states, I promise. And it's quite honestly, and this is going to be a very hot take, but I think I enjoyed it more than the Grand Canyon. So
Wow.
do with that what you will. But it was just
Wow. Okay.
Gorgeous.
Colorado.
Jaw-dropping. Colorado. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you for confirming.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, that would be my last plug.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Let's give a shout out here. Canada's the same, but USA slightly better. The national parks pass is unbelievable value. I think we bought it for $80 for the car. So that includes your vehicle, me, and a passenger. So both of us is fine. And that is for a year to any park. I just find that absolutely incredible. What value that is.
Yeah, it's so encouraging, especially knowing that that's on a like federal government level.
Yes.
It's really encouraging that at least that component of the government seems to be working well, where it's like we're acknowledging this natural land that we don't deserve, but we have, and that it doesn't belong to anyone in particular, that it should be accessible. It can be accessible. What can we do to make it happen and be just like available to anybody who wants to enjoy the natural world that we've been gifted?
Just a couple of things from me. Please head to my new website, www.wingingittravelpodcast.com. The link is in the show notes, where you can access everything about this podcast, how to support the podcast, where to find episodes, a little bit of information about me, how to contact me, how to sponsor the podcast, how to be a guest. Everything is on there for you to take a look at. And secondly, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I've got weekly episodes coming out for all my travels, pretty much the last year, and going a little bit further back. And of course, my future travels coming up in 2024. It'd be great to see you on there. It helps podcasts gain that extra bit of traction, and I'm really enjoying showing you my content I have from the last year or so. Thank you. Yeah, and USA got obviously some problems like most countries have. But the one thing that's going great is the protection of national parks. And I love the vibe in them. When you go and stay in campsites, you normally are next to someone who's quite friendly. We spoke to quite a few people
Mm-hmm.
who are like doing their RV trip for the year or migrating down south or north, whatever they're doing. So I really felt like a nice, and Canada as well, a nice vibe within that. And it's definitely a trip someone should think about. And especially in an RV, it's pretty cool just driving the open road. I mentioned earlier about what we see in UK growing up, like New York, Hollywood, and that sort of stuff. I think one of the other things that people see is this Route 66, probably classic, but just the open road, get in the car, camper van, and go. I think that's quite nostalgic for a lot of people, I think, because they probably see like films from the 60s and 70s and like, oh my God, like imagine driving those roads, no one's there. And yeah, just a trip to be aspired to, and people should do that for sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Okay, and we're going to circle back round to Europe and Scandinavia. So, Ali, first of all, I got on my list Sweden and Denmark. Again, these are, especially Sweden, definitely a road trip country. I think in the summer, be amazing. But talk to us about where you went to in Sweden. Again, I've only been to Malmo, which is cheating because you go from Copenhagen across the water. So you technically go to Sweden, but it's not really accounting, really. But yeah, where did you go and how did you find the vibe there? Because it kind of gets a good reputation all around the Scandinavian countries.
Yeah, so this trip actually was also with my university and 2 months after Bolivia. So I was just cranking them out that
what
year.
Year?
2018, I actually spent my 20th birthday in Bolivia. So I started my 20s off strong there.
Yeah.
So I went with my university, and Sweden and Denmark was actually one trip in itself. So we went to Stockholm mostly, and then I think I'm saying this right, Kristianstad, somewhere along those ways. That way.
Begins with a K?
Begins with a K, yes.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I know. I tried to look it up, and I'm like, I still am not really sure what he's saying. But as I said earlier, I am a teacher, and Sweden is doing it right with education. So we mostly went there to spend time in the schools and studying their education system. So it was really cool. We got to go to an international school. So they were speaking English, but also they did have their classes in Swedish and Danish, whatever. There was like a bunch of different things that they were learning. So we got to see a couple of different classes there. We got to see a preschool, which was way different than here in the US. It was incredible. The kids just have so much freedom to explore and be kids. And they have a rough schedule to follow, but it's not like in the US, like, okay, 8 o'clock, we're going to eat breakfast. 8:30 calendar, 9 o'clock nap time, 9:30 play outside if it's above 40 degrees Fahrenheit. If it's snowing, kids in Sweden are getting their whole snowsuit on or bundled up climbing trees. That's a liability here in the US. You would never let a kid climb a tree here. So it was just amazing to see kids be kids, and honestly, they're probably better off that way because they're not being so closed-minded in a way. They just get to explore and be themselves, and they were actually starting to learn some English too. I don't know many preschools here that don't cost a fortune if you're going to be learning another language as well. So just the fact that everyone had accessibility to that, it wasn't something special about this preschool. That was just something that they were doing as a culture. And it was so cool to see so many dads involved. I think that's something that we don't see a lot here in the US. Sure, it does happen, but dads would be out pushing the strollers and no mom or partner would be in sight. And I think that has a lot to do with their paternity leave there in Sweden. I don't know the exact facts of that, but I know they have like almost a year off or something crazy.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So that was really unique to see that cultural difference. And we spent most of our time in Stockholm. We did the Royal Palace, the Round Tower, which was free. With our city pass, you could go up to the top. There was no stairs. It was actually just like a ramp spiraling up to the top. So you get to see a city view of that. City Hall, which was really unique. It had a whole room that was made of gold, so that even the walls were gold. And it's also where they host, it's where they host the Nobel Peace Prize dinner and ball. So that was really cool. I actually was like kind of surprised. It wasn't underwhelming, but considering that the Nobel Peace Prize dinner and ball was there, I was expecting a little bit more. It wasn't held in the gold room. The gold room was just another thing that was there. So that was cool to be like, hey, I've been here where all these Nobel Peace Prize winners have been. I don't really belong here, but that's cool to be in the same spot as them. And then we did the ABBA Museum.
Of course.
Yeah.
To.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah.
As well as the Vasa Museum, where you got to see the ship. So that was cool. And then we rounded out our time in Sweden by going to, again, I'm going to butcher it, Kristianstad, I think that's how you say it, university. So we got to see adult English classes, which was so different than like a university here. The students were like 25 and up. Whereas here, like usually by 25, most people are done with at least their undergraduate degree. So that was unique to hear their college experience. Now they're of course not living in dorms, but just to hear how they are able to balance, getting a degree and having a family and maybe another job. So I really love that in Sweden we were able to experience the culture and their school system and just kind of open our eyes to how much the US has to grow in terms of education. And I could go on a whole rant, I'm sure Regan can vouch for this, but I could go on a whole rant of the US education system. But it was just a unique experience that I don't think many people get to have. Like, how many people can be a stranger and go into a school in another country? I don't think many people get to have that opportunity. So that was incredible to do that. And be in Sweden. I hadn't really been in a Scandinavian country before, so it was eye-opening, the price of things. And being a college student, I was like, okay, this is a little more than I bargained for. So the way we did save money is we went to the grocery store and just got like a couple of things to just take with us and pack for the day. And that was really cool, just taking the time to see a local grocery store and where people buy their groceries and try different snacks that they have. And it was really cool. And like the grocery store had fresh orange juice. Like there was a machine that was pressing it right there.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, why is this not here in the US? We need this. So yeah, that was incredible.
Yeah, I think big up to Sweden and Norway and the Scandinavian countries in general. I think they do have, let's say, high taxes, but it does go towards all the services that are essentially free. So I think university education is free for natives, I think, if you're from there. So that saves a heck of a lot of money compared to US when you're paying an extortionate amount for college. But it also goes towards like just the whole infrastructure of the countries, right? And that's why it seems to be leading the way. Like healthcare is great. The school system is great. It's clean, it's safe. The roads are great. Like everything's just good about it, right? That's why they're kind of seen as a bit of a beacon. I think we felt that in Copenhagen when we went to Denmark and just got that vibe that it's just done a bit properly here, isn't it? Like it's just a bit good.
Yeah, and that's the only place that I went to in Denmark was Copenhagen.
Yeah.
So we had about one full day there. That was because we were we drove there and then we were flying out of Denmark. So we just had a day there to explore, and we were basically just running around the whole day, like trying to get to as many things as we possibly could. One thing that I was like, this is overrated, was the Little Mermaid statue. Not worth the time.
No.
I was with a group of girls and I was convinced to go to see it. It was March. It was freezing. It's on the water. It is far out of your way. Don't make the time to go see that. Maybe unless it's like a hot summer day and you have some time to kill. But if you only have like a day or two, I don't think it's worth it. But that's just my personal opinion. And they had a Lego store that was amazing. I'm not really into Legos, but it really drew me in. And I was like, I need to buy everything. Now I didn't, because again, that is also an expensive country. But it was amazing. And we got to have dinner along the canal. So it was just a really magical experience, especially as a college student, just going to explore new countries. And 2018 was the first time that I had gone out of the country without my parents. So Bolivia and then Sweden and Denmark. It was just cool too. Of course, I was like with the university, so it was hard to stray away or get lost. Someone was always going to be looking for me, but it was just a really cool experience to go out of the country for the first time without my parents, because we had spent so many times going as a whole family. So it was fun to just go and experience those different cultures and then come back and be able to share what I've learned with my family. So really grateful that I had those 3 opportunities really so close to each other, because now my traveling has died down since then. But it was fun to do that while I was young, because I just recently turned 20 then. So
yeah, and different parts of the world, completely different things going on. So it's good to get that perspective. Then, like you say, bring it back and talk to people. I think that's one of the key things of travel, right? Once you can share some wisdom of what you've learned, that can only enhance your local community and your country to a bigger extent, I think. So yeah, fair play for going on a different trip. And then we come to the combined trip, which is Iceland. So talk us through, how did you both go away? Like, what was the plan? How did you work it out? What type of trip were you expecting in Iceland? And it's a place I have been to, but it's incredible, right?
Yeah, how much time do we have? Because we could talk for about
Yeah.
like 3 hours.
Yeah. Iceland is, oh my gosh. We got to go together, which was really special. Allie, was that in high school or college?
College. I think it was the end
College.
of my freshman year, end of your sophomore year.
Yeah, yes, that's correct. Well, I cannot believe that. Anyways, that's
We're
besides the
old. We're
point
getting
how
old,
long
okay?
it's been.
Yeah, let's not mention
But
age.
Yeah.
it feels like yesterday, because it's a trip that we relive so frequently. That country is the most incredible place when it comes to the landscape, when it comes to the simplicity of life, when it comes to the respect for nature and natural resources. I felt like I left Iceland a better citizen of the United States, even though I was in a different country.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it was, I mean, Allie, I'll kind of start with a couple of different highlights from our trip and then absolutely like jump in too, because I know we share some and then we definitely have some different. Iceland, so when we were, I think it was like the first day we were there, it was raining. We went in the summer. We went with my parents. We got a car. We were going again, similar to Ireland. We got a car and essentially drove the entire coast of the country all the way around in about 10, 11 days or so. We packed into only a backpack.
Love
It
it.
was challenging, and I don't know how I did it, and I don't know if I will ever be able to do it again. But maybe if there's a trip to Iceland planned or promised. So the first day we were there, it was raining. We had all of our rain gear. We were prepared, but we wanted to go on this hike, which was in the, I'm going to mispronounce this because I think Icelandic might be the hardest language.
It is.
But Reykjadular Valley, something along those lines. It's not directly like in that kind of main loop near Reykjavik, but it is in kind of the capital region rather. And we go up this valley. It's misty. There are waterfalls in the distance because I'm convinced that Iceland is the capital of waterfalls. Like, it's just amazing. You see them all over the place. And we get to the top of the mountain where we're going to be getting in a hot spring, which was amazing because it's, cold and rainy and all you want to do is get in the hot spring. But the problem was that we had to change into our bathing suits on the side of a mountain. And though there were changing areas promised, all it was this teeny tiny little like X, like 2 pieces of wood built into an X to create like 4 little I don't even know. You cannot consider them changing rooms. You cannot. So immediately, Allie and I look at each other. We're like, well, we just have to get over ourselves. And there we are in the freezing cold on top of a mountain in Iceland, changing into our bathing suits, diving into these hot springs. And that part was amazing. But it is something I will never forget because that's something that's so different from the United States. You know, it's like nobody cared in Iceland that you were like naked on the top of a mountain. But in the United States, if you're doing that, it's like you get arrested. You cannot do that. So that was something that I will never forget. It was an amazing hike, and I really want to go back and do it not in the freezing rain. I don't know if there's a time of year where that is really a guarantee,
No.
but it was an incredible hike and a really funny memory.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like you're there, so might as well just do it, right? You don't know anyone there. Like
Exactly.
Regan said, I would never do that here in the US. Never. But you're there, so going all in, I guess.
Yeah.
But like Regan said, we were with her family and we were there for 10 days. So we did the whole outer ring of the country. So we hit a lot of the major points. And the one that I really enjoyed was Vic. And they had a black sand beach, which is incredible. And nothing like I've ever seen before. And you have to be careful though. The water moves in and out very quickly. Regan and I were just looking at some shells, enjoying ourselves, and all of a sudden there's like gush of water is just coming at us. So be mindful of your surroundings. But yeah, it was just absolutely incredible. Like it actually is black. I know, Instagram, social media can alter things. And now with AI, you never know what's actually real, but it is actually black. And it was so cool to see a black sand beach. I don't know where you would ever see that in the US, probably nowhere.
Hawaii.
Yeah, Hawaii, true.
I think it's the only place I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, good point. But yeah, also another one was Husavik, which is like a smaller fishing town, and we just were going in and out of fjords most of the time that we were in Iceland, and just passing through some of the fishing towns, but also stopping in some of them. And it was just so cool to see the small villages and the boats that they were using that were supporting their economy. And like Regan said, we were staying in Airbnbs, and we stayed with a guy named Framar. And
Framar!
Yes, what a hoot that was. So we were eating at probably the only restaurant, Regan, right, that was in the town that we were in. Was that in Husavik? I can't remember. Yeah, maybe.
No, it was like Flattery, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Flattery. That's right. So we were staying at his apartment, but we were eating dinner at this restaurant, and he walks in, but we didn't know that was him at that point. And he picked us out of the crowd and was like, "Oh, are you the people staying with us?" And we're like, "Oh, are you Framar?" He's like, "Yeah." So we were staying with Framar in his maybe 2-bedroom apartment. I think that's kind of an exaggeration. We were really crammed in there. Regan and I were laying in his living room floor. We were with our parents, so it seemed safe. But it was just so funny, and he loved to harass us about Trump and American politics. So we got the brunt of that taste of how people really feel about Americans. But yeah, it was just so cool to stay with a local, even though he was giving us a hard time about our culture and our country's politics at the time. But just have that experience with a local, I think is, something that not a lot of people get to have. And I know we had that again in our honeymoon suite that Regan and I got to share. We got to talk to the host there, but this was, I guess it was a guest house, not exactly a hostel, but more of a guest house. And so Regan's parents were in their own room, and Regan and I were in our own room. And the bedding was like brown with like red pillows, and it was totally supposed to be like this romantic room. And it's just us two, like, I don't know, probably 19, 20-year-olds, and just We could not believe, like, how did we end up in the honeymoon suite, right? But it was memorable nonetheless. And I would say it was probably one of the highlights. We were just able to connect and, talk about our friendship and the trip and, where we see ourselves in the future. So I think this trip, I mean, we can still talk about Iceland, but this trip was just something that our friendship needed too. We got to kind of reconnect because, like Regan said, we were in college. So I was in Pennsylvania in college. She was in New York. So we were states away, and she's a year ahead of me in school. So we had just kind of, grown apart a little bit in different stages of life. So the trip was kind of what ultimately brought our friendship back together. And I think we're forever grateful for that trip in more ways than one.
So how did you get onto the trip then? Because obviously, if you were slightly drifting apart, you must have just heard about the trip, like, oh yeah, I can join, or were you invited? Like, how did you get yourself onto the trip?
Well, Regan's family was going, and my family was asked if we wanted to go because our families had gone on vacation a lot together.
Oh yeah.
And my mom, I'm not even gonna say my dad, I think it was all my mom, was like, oh, I don't have time to take off. And my dad's a teacher, so he had time, but my dad's like, well, I'm not gonna go without your brother and your mom, whatever. So I'm like, well, who said I can't go, right? Like, I have time, right? Yeah. So I weaseled my way in there, and I was fortunate enough that they were, accepting of me going with them. So I was able to go with them, and I think it was okay with them, I hope.
Yeah. Allie's an adopted daughter in our family, so we can't get rid of her. She can't get rid of us, no matter what happens.
Yeah, they're kind of stuck with me.
I thought you were gonna say like your parents like still mention it today, like, oh, she came on the bloody trip, like, oh, she ruined the trip.
Well, I hate to break it to you, Allie.
They might, you never know.
Oh, funny. Yeah, Iceland, amazing, right? Totally unique.
Amazing.
In terms of the geography, and the people are quite funny. They're quite quirky, and they all speak English because Icelandic is just ridiculous. I don't know where to start even begin with that. So I think they have to speak English really to communicate just internationally, not just the English people, but people who visit. And again, I mentioned earlier about road trip countries. That is in the top 3 in the summer, not in the winter. I think getting a camper van and driving that island like you guys did, that'd be pretty cool. Yeah. I think they have a problem though with accommodation, because like you said, you stop off in little towns. I think there's only a certain amount of places people can stay, and it gets quite a lot of tourists in the summer. So I think even camper vans are quite crucial now, because you can just camp on the side of the road or in a campsite and not rely on Airbnb. So I think that's a bit of a problem they have at the minute. But interestingly, Iceland during COVID, I think invested the most money ever in tourism that year out of any country in the world. So I think they saw the need to kind of take the break, use it, get it all up to scratch, if you like, build some stuff, build better roads, whatever they had to do, ready for post-COVID. So I think now they're a bit better equipped for tourists.
Yeah. I hope that I'm glad that people are recognizing Iceland for the amazing country that it is. And like I said, one of my favorite parts too was like that focus on sustainability and what is the earth giving us? How do we use it in a way that's economical and sustainable? And how do we not use excess? How do we not damage what we have? And I just adore that, how they're using that kind of like special geothermal energy. I think that's what they're using.
Yeah.
And it's powering most of their country. And that's what they have. They're on so many hot spots, hotbeds, like wherever tectonic plates, all of the sciencey things that we've proven tonight that I am not great at. But it was just incredible to see the natural beauty. And I'm glad that people are recognizing it. And also, I hope that as they recognize it, people continue to respect it for what it is. People don't just come in and trash it. And that goes for any place, but particularly a place that's so delicate, that's so fragile, that's so amazing, and that has so much good going for it. I worry about Iceland a little bit, that it is gonna be too touched, too discovered. That's my only worry.
The one thing they have in their favor, it's bloody expensive. So I think if you're planning to go for like 3 weeks or even longer, like that's a lot of money to save up. So I think that kind of plays into their hands because they might just get a little turnover. Like you go for a week, 10 days, and then you have to go because staying in Reykjavik in a hostel was still $70-$80 a night. I think it's probably more now. It's been 10 years since I went. So I think they do have that in their favor. And I think they might be shielded from somewhere like Venice or Barcelona where you can get like really cheap deals. So yeah, but you're right.
That's a great point.
Yeah, you got to hope they recognize that and people respect it because it is crucial.
Yeah, for sure.
But what a country. And there's a free walking tour in Reykjavik that people should do. I think I need to get details of that. I've got no more other details, but I just joined one from the hostel called Kex, Kex. They're also a jazz bar, so random hostel. But yeah, they have like a
I need the details.
bar in the middle, and then the dorms upstairs. It's quite an interesting place. But yeah,
Very
they
cool.
kind of advise on like free walking tours and stuff. I mentioned in my notes, might seem a bit random to you both, that I put, did you manage to stay out until 6 or 7 a.m. in Reykjavik? Because the locals told me that they don't start going out in town until 2 a.m. because one, it's too expensive to drink because it's like ridiculous, and they just pre-drink at home. But all the nightclubs and the bars stay until 6 or 7 a.m. So I think the done thing in Reykjavik if you're young is to like stay out all night. So don't know if you guys managed that, but
I think the latest we probably stayed out was midnight. The whole trip.
was it light or dark at midnight? Because you went in the summer, right?
Right. The sun did set. I do remember seeing some beautiful sunsets. And by the time we went to Reykjavik, it was like the last day. So we're like, we are exhausted. So it was basically like, let's just, walk around a little bit, see the main tourist attractions, get something to eat, and then let's just relax. So I would like to go back to Reykjavik and explore it a little bit more than just like the surface level. And I would like to go back when we can see the Northern Lights, because that is something I feel like I have really missed out on. And that's kind of the inspiration behind our podcast logo, the Northern Lights. We got that inspiration from our desire to want to see them in Iceland. So kind of a full circle moment there. But yeah, we no crazy 6 a.m. or anything. We were probably like getting up for a flight or something, because we actually took Wow Air. I don't even know if you remember maybe 1 year, 2 year stint. So yeah, I'm sure we probably had some really early like flight, because it's of course dirt cheap. So cheap they went out of business. But yeah, no crazy late nights for us.
There is another cheap airline that goes to Iceland. I don't know if it's from America, but they do go from Toronto and maybe Montreal. Definitely Toronto is Play Airlines. They're Icelandic. Yeah, they go pretty cheap. So people wondering where can they get to Iceland cheap in North America. If you make your way to somewhere like Toronto, you can probably get a flight across. And Icelandic Air have that rule, right? I don't know if you know the rule. Icelandic Air, if you go to Iceland via there to, I don't know, Rome as an example, they give you 3 days overnight with no extra charge on changing the flight. So if people are looking just for like a little dip into Reykjavik, that's a good tip as well if they want to book Icelandic Air.
Yeah. I do actually just want to mention on Iceland one final highlight, which was the Freidheimer greenhouse. This place was a tomato greenhouse. You can eat in the greenhouse. It's all tomato soup and a spread of different breads that you would not believe. It was delicious. Everything was tomato. There was tomato in the water. There's tomatoes, of course. You're in a greenhouse. There's tomatoes hanging all over you. The decorations are tomatoes. Everything is tomatoes. And it was a meal that I will dream about for the rest of my life. So if you are looking for the most incredible food in Iceland, the Freidheimer, don't ask me to spell it, but the Freidheimer greenhouse. Good luck Googling it.
Great tip. Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's far from Reykjavik either. I don't think any more than 2 hours, right?
No, we landed at like 5 a.m. We drove a couple hours, napped in the parking lot of the greenhouse until it opened, and had the best meal of my life.
Yeah, food's interesting in Iceland. I don't really have many highlights from my time there, but two things do speak out. Fish and chips is normally quite good, but expensive.
Mm.
And also, there's a hot dog van that's quite famous in Reykjavik. I think they do hot dogs from a stall. Big queues there. I think they're like quite cheap compared to Icelandic standards. So that's all I can remember.
Yeah.
There you go.
The hot dog thing in Iceland confused me. I was like, man, hot dogs? Why hot dogs? But they're everywhere. They're like the big thing at gas stations and everything. We had
Great
to try
question.
them, of course. They're pretty standard, but
Yeah.
yeah, fascinating.
Fascinating. Great question. Don't know the answer.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah, just a quick one. I just want to say there are many ways to support this podcast. You can buy me a coffee and help support the podcast with $5. Or you can go to my merch store with the affiliate link with TeePublic, where there's plenty of merch available to buy, such as t-shirts, jumpers, hoodies, and also some children's clothing. Thirdly, which is free, you can also rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, or Good Pods. Also, you can find me on social media on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. Simply just search for Winging It Travel Podcast, and you'll find me displaying all my social media content for traveling, podcast, and other stuff. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to head towards your podcast in a minute, but I've got a few extra questions just to finish off on your travels. I'd like to know, what type of traveler are you? Are you a backpacker? Are you a mid-range? Are you a luxury? How do you see yourselves?
Very mid-range. Maybe
Agreed.
dip my toes in backpacker at some point too, just depending on the location, trying to be more budget friendly. But yeah, probably mostly mid-range. My dreams are luxury, safaris or, things like that are definitely out of my budget, but would love to be able to experience them
one day.
Yeah. Never say never. Didn't Justin Bieber teach us anything? But yeah, I think I'm pretty similar. I like to think luxury, but I'm definitely more mid-range realistically.
Yeah, that's a good place to be, I think, though. You can delve into both areas if you can on occasion.
Yeah. And sometimes you can get luxury at a budget price.
Of course.
Depending on where you are or what your standards really are. And I also think that like luxury is kind of what you make it too.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. And penultimate question on travel is, do you have like a rule with going somewhere new each year? There can be a state in your own country or a place in your own country. Do you have like a rule that you just have to go somewhere new per year, or are you pretty relaxed about it? You can go back to the same place again, or how are you thinking with that?
My mindset is I need a new place like every other month, but my wallet says otherwise. So realistically, I'm like a new place at least once a year.
Cool.
Usually in the summer, of course, because that works best with my teaching schedule. But yeah, try to go to new places, whether that be in the US or out of the country.
Yeah. My rule isn't more about like where I'm traveling to necessarily, or a rule of every year has to be something new. My rule more so is a checklist for types of travel each year. So that would include, I want to make sure I travel with my full family each year, which usually happens because my mother is planning out our family's travels for years in advance. So there has to be a full family travel of some kind. There has to be some kind of travel, just me and my husband. I think that's also really important to kind of mix up how you're traveling. And then there has to be some kind of travel that isn't vacation. So those two can more so be vacation, whether it's family or whether it's relaxation, but one that I can be a little lenient on, where it's like, I'm going to work on this vacation so that like it's kind of responsible, quote unquote. But those
slower.
are kind of my rules in terms
Like
of how
travel.
I travel. Yeah.
You can like maybe go somewhere for a month, but you're actually working 2, even 3 weeks of that, but you're kind of immersing yourself into somewhere new.
Yeah.
Dream scenario. I don't see how it can be better if you're just like doing a bit of work and a bit of travel and not push for time to an extent. That's what I learned from last year. But yeah, if you're like dotting about all the time, it gets quite fast paced and quite tiring. But if you manage to just like chill out for a bit, do a bit of work, and then live the local culture a bit more, it's pretty cool. I can't see a better way, unless you have a load of money and just have to work. But hey,
yeah,
there you go.
it's pretty sweet.
Okay, and what's coming up in 2024 for travel? Anything on the pipeline?
Nothing too crazy here for me. So far, just going to Nashville with my brother to see one of his favorite country artists. That was my Christmas gift to him. So just spending a weekend in Nashville. He's never been there before, and he's all about country. And then in July, my family's summer trip is going to be to Texas. So we'll spend about a week in Texas. Yeah. So that'll be really cool. Maybe a couple weekend trips here and there, but nothing set in stone yet.
Yeah. That'll be fun though. You and your brother, I think that's new for you this year. Is like traveling just the two of you. That'll be
yes.
I'm interested to hear all about that. Yeah.
Could be a podcast episode.
More different. Yeah, that could be a whole podcast episode. You're right.
Tune in for that.
Very, very different. Yes.
Coming up for me this year, I have already had a couple of trips. But then next month I am going to London for a week. And I've never been to London, so I'm really excited.
Really? Where are you staying?
I don't know.
Central?
If I'm being honest, my mom booked the trip first, and then my husband and I were like, wait a minute, we want to go to London too. So then she had to like redo the Airbnb, and I honestly don't know where it is.
Airbnb. Got it. Okay.
I know that it's pretty central. I just don't know exactly like where it is necessarily. So it'll be a little bit of a surprise, but we've been doing a lot of research and I'm getting really excited. So yeah.
Lovely.
Looking forward to it. And then this summer, my husband and I are celebrating 5 years of marriage. So we're going on a nice Greek Isles kind of Mediterranean cruise that I'm really excited about. Gonna see a lot of places. We're doing a few stops in Croatia, Greece, Montenegro, and then we're spending a few days in Porto, Portugal on the back end of the trip. Just kind of living it for a few days, and I'm really excited about that. And I think that's kind of it for now. And then now living in Florida and having family back in New York will make the trip all the way up north at Christmas time. But other than that, yeah, that's what 2024 looks like.
Okay. And London, are you going to try some traditional London food?
Absolutely. I travel via my stomach. So
okay. Do you want some arguably disgusting but gotta try food? Do you want a recommendation?
Sure, hit me.
Well, there's two, right? There's pie and mash. Now, it might sound basic. It is a pie and it's mashed potato, but the sauce is liquor. So it's a liquor type sauce. So, alcoholic-y type tasting. It's very East End traditional. So if you can find somewhere sort of like East Central, I don't really have a recommendation for a place, but it's not hard to find. Pie and liquor is a classic dish.
Oh my gosh, I'm writing this down right now.
Pie and liquor. And the second one is jellied eels, which people are going to cringe at, I think, if they hear that. That's a traditional East End.
I have heard that. Oh.
Yeah. And the third one would be just like an English breakfast. That'd be worth doing. Yeah.
English breakfast, got to do it. Okay, absolutely.
If you see like a grotty, sort of like earthy calf on the side of a street, go in there and try some food. Would be probably the best thing to do.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, we're gonna have to connect on all things. Oh London
we can
here.
connect afterwards. Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and we're gonna finish off just some information about your podcast. So the Wanderlusting Wives Podcast. Can you tell listeners why did you start the podcast? I assume you talk about travel. And do you do guests or solo episodes or both? And how often do you release an episode?
Yeah, so we just started our third season of the Wanderlusting Wives podcast. We started because it seemed like the world was never going to open up during COVID. Same. And we kind of felt like we were getting the itch to travel, and we felt like other people were, and we wanted to kind of take people through an auditory experience of traveling and sharing our experiences, which then turned into us eventually having guests on our podcast. And that was season 1 was mostly like us sharing our experiences, a couple of guests, friends and family, and a couple of other podcasters. And then season 2, strictly, well, I shouldn't say strictly, we did have a few of our own episodes, but mostly guests. And then we did have a segment, Wildcard Wednesday. We were just kind of hang out with us. We talked about our weeks. We would spin a fun little wheel with a random topic we didn't know about until that moment in time.
Oh, great.
So then it was like every week we had an episode, to Travel Tuesdays and Wildcard Wednesdays. And then this season we're like, you know what? Wildcard Wednesday was fun, but a lot of people are really drawn to the travel part of our podcast. So
Cool.
we're just focusing on the Travel Tuesdays, and comes out every other Tuesday with some kind of special guest, and we'll make an appearance here and there, since, as you know, we do have some of our own travel plans this year. So mostly relying on guests, but we will give our own trip experiences throughout the season as well.
Yeah. It's been a lot of fun. It kind of came about randomly as just this idea. I think Allie, I actually think Nate, Allie's husband, was the one who was like kind of jokingly, oh, you should just like start a travel podcast, because we were talking about mid-COVID, you're like, I'm not doing anything. I don't have hobbies. Like, I'm not hanging out
Yeah.
with friends. It felt like we were the most boring people in the world. And so jokingly, Nate was like, start a podcast. And we were like, ha 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 ha. Wait, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
And yeah, exactly like Allie said, 3 years in, and it's just been a ton of fun and a great way for two friends to connect from a distance apart too.
Yeah, the community aspect is great, right? I think I started 3 years ago, so I think I was probably the same thoughts as you.
Hey, yes.
When your main hobby is travel and you can't do it, I mean, what else are you going to do? You have to talk about it, aren't you? So
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
even now, like just in between travel in normal day-to-day life, I struggle with trying to do some hobbies. So yeah, this is a great way to connect with people like yourselves and talk about travel, right? I don't think there's much thing better other than actually traveling itself. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And how often so your seasons come out? Like, do you do like one a year or 2 a year? Like, how do you work that? And where can people find it?
Yeah, 1 a year is each of our seasons. And you can find us, as cliche as it is, wherever you listen to your podcasts, is where you can find us.
Okay. And do you have a social media and or website?
Yeah, so we did have a website, and then we're like, forget that. We weren't really paying much attention to it because we were pouring all of our time into the podcast, and really wanted to make sure we're producing the best episodes and finding the best guests possible. So the website's on hold. But we
you can still access it, but
yes, you can.
We're just not updating it.
Yeah, there's nothing really updated except for it automatically like updates our newest episode. But yeah, as far as social media goes, you can find us on Instagram at Wanderlusting Wives. Twitter is at Wanderlust Wives, and then Facebook is Wanderlusting Wives Podcast.
Got it. I'll whack some notes. So I'll whack some links in the show notes so people can just click on that and find you guys. And we're gonna finish the episode with some quick fire travel questions. I think you are well averse to this sort of things. I think you do it on your own podcast, as I experienced before. So, because there's 2 of you here, and I normally go for 3, it's going to be interesting. So it might be just 1 each, because I don't know how you do a third one combined, because it might be completely different. But I'm going to kick off with...
It's travel question time.
Tomorrow, if money's not an issue, time is not an issue, and you can travel to 3 countries new that you've not been to before each tomorrow, where are you going to go?
It feels like it changes on the day to day.
Yeah.
100%.
But tomorrow, if we're talking about tomorrow, for me, it would be Maldives, it would be Italy, and it would be Tanzania for a safari.
Love it.
Yeah, I am also Tanzania for a safari, New Zealand, and then Switzerland.
Cool. Amazing. Okay. And tell me a favorite cuisine that you've experienced on your travels each.
I'll go first because I'm boring. Like I said, cow tongue was really putting it out there for me. I really love just trying different pasta dishes. That is so basic, but it is safe. It's safe, and I know if I'm spending my money on it, chances are I'm gonna like it. So
Italian, can't beat it.
yep.
Yeah, I think I haven't been to the places yet where I think my favorite cuisines would be. Like,
Yeah,
I have a
good point.
feeling that Greece this summer is going to be my favorite.
Oh,
I have a feeling.
very good.
More soon on that, but currently, surprisingly, I really fell in love with the curry in Ireland,
Oh, yeah.
which
Okay.
which
don't know what to
just
label that
sounds
as.
so
Irish?
backwards. Yeah, but it was just I was floored. Let's just put it that way. I was floored by how incredible and flavorful the curry in Ireland was.
You know what? I understand. There's two things for curry, right? There's the traditional sort of South Asian curry, which we all know is original. We get it. And if you go there, it is unbelievable. I can attest to that. But there's also British and Irish curry, which is obviously an adaptation of the Indian or Sri Lankan or Pakistani curry, but it's just been adapted to that culture for like 100 years, whatever, right? So that is in itself a good curry. And I think I miss it. It sounds like you miss it. And I totally get it. Yeah.
I'm glad I'm not the only one. I felt so silly.
Okay. And if you both could move to a country tomorrow to live there for a year, where do you think you're going to go?
Oh, man, I only have till tomorrow to decide.
Yeah.
Oh.
Quick fire.
I think that I would move to specifically Bali. Well, not a country. I like Bali, because I think I'm really used to this kind of instantaneous culture.
Mm.
And I live somewhere beautiful, but it still feels like really, I don't know, industrialized and like just I want to go somewhere where it's equally, if not more, probably more beautiful with water. I feel really connected to water.
Same.
And I've just learned so much about the culture. Allie, I know, really wants to go to Bali, and I've been like learning through that, like watching movies, like watching videos, travel, like vlogs. I think that would be an amazing place to live, to grow as a human, and to honestly be humbled by the beauty of the people, the culture, and the environment.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna have to pick Costa Rica.
Great.
I really want to be fluent in Spanish. I've never been to Costa Rica, but I like the idea of like the jungle and the beaches. I really want to see some turtles. So maybe if I move there, I'd get the chance to see them hatching, hopefully. So I think Costa Rica it is.
Okay. If you both could sit in one city with a cup of coffee or glass of wine, whatever you decide to drink, and just watch the world go by for an afternoon, where are you going to sit?
This might be a hot take, but I actually love Paris. And I know some people are like, oh, it's so dirty. And I don't like Paris. It's touristy, but I love Paris. And I would love to just sit there and people watch and watch the Eiffel Tower sparkle. And yeah.
I've just been doing my YouTube video today, actually, on Paris, coming up this week. And it's got about 4 or 5 cafes in there. I don't care. I know it's cliche and like, oh, Cafe Paris, I know. No, I don't care. You got to sit there for an afternoon. I'm totally in agreement with that.
I think I would pick a glass of wine in Palermo, Sicily.
Oh, trendy. Classy.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. Can you tell me, let's go for 3 each, because I think you could probably rattle 3 US states that people should visit that you've been to.
Alaska, Colorado, and Oregon.
The Oregon coast. You cannot go wrong with the Oregon coast. That's definitely the one that came to mind for me. Colorado and Utah.
Lovely. Okay. And if you could pick one view for the rest of time, so what I mean is it could be a beach, could be a mountain, could be a city, and that's the only thing you can see, where you're going to pick to look at for the rest of your life?
A mountain, as long as I can see the sunset.
Got it.
For me, it's a beach, for sure.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
Mhm.
What am I going to think of next? What about if you could learn one language each fluently? I know you mentioned Spanish before. Maybe another one. What language would you learn and why?
It's a great question. I think I would learn Italian. I know that's like sort of cliche in a way also. It's beautiful. So many languages are beautiful, but Italian in music, in speaking, I love it.
I am gonna go kind of off the rails here, but Mandarin, I don't even know where to start with that, but I like the challenge, and also it can open up a whole nother part of the world that I maybe don't have access to. And I have a friend who speaks Mandarin, so she can maybe get me started. So yeah, if I could know Spanish, English, and Mandarin, I feel like I could just conquer the world.
Yeah, I saw a TikTok the other day that gave a breakdown of how many hours you need to learn in a classroom to get sort of proficient, and Mandarin is for English speaking people at the top for hardest. I think it's like 2,200 hours. So there's an idea of how hard that language is. Spanish is like 750. So there's a difference in for us to learn language.
Wow.
Yeah, so that kind of blew my mind a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's crazy.
I think Japanese is up there as well. Arabic, they're the tough ones, just because they're completely different alphabets and stuff.
Yeah.
A couple more questions. This might be a weird one. Any place that you did not like that you traveled to?
I'm gonna say Cozumel, Mexico. Now, I say this because I went on a cruise and I had like a couple hours there, but like as soon as we got off the boat, they're playing Party in the USA on the bus, and I'm like, I wanted to leave America. That's why I'm on this cruise. And so it just kind of like turned me off right away. I'm sure it's a beautiful country. I just need to or a beautiful city. I just need to explore it more, but I don't really have a strong desire to go back to Cozumel.
Fair.
Yeah, I was just there on a weekend cruise, and it's too Americanized. Yeah. It's really sad. For me, it's also Mexico, but it's Cabo. I'm not really a partier anyways, but then like when you're partying at 9 a.m., I'm like, I can't do this.
Hang on,
is weird.
Is that the start or the end?
That's an excellent question. I don't know. All I know is that there were tequila shots
both
involved.
Bad, but I'm just trying to get an idea of what's going on.
Yeah. So was not super a fan of Cabo. It's just too much.
Fair enough. I get it. Okay. The last question for the podcast is, in a sentence or two each, why should someone take the leap to go and travel, and specifically out of their comfort zone? And why would that benefit them going forward as a human being?
I'll go.
Okay. I was like, I have something. Are you going? What's happening? Got it. Okay.
Just gonna stare at each other. Just I guess referring back to what I said earlier, like at least I think for me personally, life begins outside your comfort zone. I think it's so easy to get caught up in the monotony of life and your regular routine. And I think it's important to push yourself and go outside of your comfort zone and experience new cultures. There's so much more out there than what's in maybe your hometown. And even if you just go once and travel somewhere, at least you're getting to see a new perspective and a new culture and maybe even a new language. So just getting out there and being uncomfortable. It's hard being uncomfortable, but I think you can really grow as a person and have some really amazing experiences when you do go outside of your comfort zone.
Nice.
Yeah. I think for me, you're not guaranteed tomorrow. Anything can happen. Age is not the only thing that could end us. And so recognizing the somewhat fragility of life, not being scared of it, but at least acknowledging it and realizing that if you only had the next 24 hours, what would you have seen in your lifetime? And would you be proud of it? Would you be excited by it? Would you feel fulfilled by it? And then just asking yourself, well, why am I not doing that then? If I only had 24 hours, would I do it? But if I don't know that I have that, then why not? You will only be better for knowing more people and more cultures and just having a global understanding.
Yeah, that's amazing. I actually had a similar thought. Maybe someone said a similar thing on another podcast I did, that if tomorrow was it, are you happy with that? Like what you've done? If you're interested in travel and you're sitting there going, oh, I should have said more, then that has got to be a key or an idea for you to go, oh, okay, well, maybe I need to sort it out. Yeah, it's absolutely key.
For
that.
sure.
I think personally, I do want to finish on that, but personally, I think I would be satisfied. Yeah, because there's a bit of realism in it, isn't there? I think we all want to go all the time, but life isn't like that for most people. But yeah, it's a good question and it's a good thought to have. Yeah, quite deep that to finish the podcast on.
Yeah, I love this.
Okay, guys. So yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast. It's been a great chat. Super fun.
Thank you so much for having
chill.
us.
Lots of stories, lots of laughs and smiles. So exactly what this podcast is about. And I really appreciate you both making time for me and the questions and for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. We had a really great time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome.
Thank you for listening to my Winging It Travel podcast episode today. You can find me on Instagram at James Hammond Travel or Winging It Travel Podcast. You can search for both. I release weekly clips of this podcast episode, as well as photos from the last 8 to 10 years of my travels. You can also follow me on TikTok, Facebook and Pinterest by searching Winging It Travel Podcast. I do release daily content to do with travel and the podcast throughout the week. Also check out my website, jameshammond.org. There's content about myself, my travels, and there's also a newsletter sign up as well as a contact form. Finally, please rate and review the podcast on Podchaser. This is my platform of choice. Alternatively, you can rate this on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from. This really helps the podcast gain a bit of traction for the future in terms of guests and content. And I'm glad to see that you guys are listening out there, reviewing it and enjoying the content so far. Stay safe, stay humble, keep listening, keep traveling, and I'll catch you soon. Cheers, James.